It's the same damage, okay? And, talking about damage, the city of Minneapolis, okay, they actually did substantially defund their police service. And they laid off a number of officers over the summer months, largely in response to the demands that were being made by these radical, I hesitate to even call them left-wing groups, okay? They're just radical, almost anarchists. And so the city of Minneapolis went along with this. And now they have so many problems in Minneapolis that the city now is trying to find ways, after having laid off police officers, now they're trying to find ways to attract, to bring in help from outside police agencies in order to fill the gaps that have been left in policing by the laying off of police officers. So go figure that out. And that, I know that's happening in Minneapolis. I would not be surprised to learn that that's happening in other jurisdictions where the city council, again, basically genuflected. They bowed down and scraped before these radical anarchist groups that, frankly, have no idea what they're talking about. They just come up with nice-sounding slogans. They block traffic. They cause chaos, etc. And politicians cower before them because, what you don't want chaos in your city. So they figure, well, the best way to not have chaos is to just go with the flow. But there are real consequences in this case of going with the flow, as I mentioned.
Well, my dad used to say the only thing that goes with the flow is a dead fish. And in this case, I think that's flattering to the fish, because these counselors are responsible. What's the primary job of government, Joseph?
Providing for the safety and security of the population.
So how do you do that if you take away the very instrument of making that possible?
Well, underlying, on a serious note, underlying this, and I think it's wrong, but let's just I really sort of peel back the onion and let's really identify what the problem here is. Underlying this, for those people who take it seriously, is the mistaken belief that when people do bad things, it's because they're disadvantaged. It's because they haven't had a nice childhood. I don't know. Their families are they were impoverished. They haven't had the same opportunities as other people have had. Yeah,
Boy, I wish I could use those excuses.
There's always a reason, external reason, why people act badly, and that's a way of looking at the world, okay, where we don't hold people responsible for the poor decisions that they make. And it's a very deterministic philosophy, because it basically what it comes down to is a statement. And that statement is, you as a human being have little or no control over your behavior or how you act. That everything that you do is a consequence of all of the forces that exist around you that have influenced you or shaped you. And I don't want to say that there is no influence, but ultimately what makes us human beings is our capacity to say no to ourselves, our ability to rise above the circumstances that we find ourselves living in, to be able to say, I know what's right and I know what's wrong, and despite the temptation for me to do the wrong thing here, despite the disadvantages that I might have, the inequalities that I've experienced in my life, I'm not going to rob and loot and destroy people's private property. I am going to continue to be a law-abiding citizen. And I may have to face up to the struggles that other people have pointed out exist, whether they're real or not. Let's assume that they are real, okay? I'm going to confront those, but I'm not going to confront them in a way that is harmful to other people and ultimately to myself. it's this that's the dividing line. Are you capable of controlling yourself, or are you merely a tumbleweed that basically just reacts to whatever way the wind is blowing you from one place to the other?
Well, that is a very eloquent way of putting things, Joseph, as always. And one of the things that that bothers me is this idea that people actually believe that they cannot, what they've rejected, and you've been splashing shells all around it, is the idea that people can be bad, that they will willingly make bad choices, knowing full well what the consequences are and making those choices anyway. We have a whole, 100,000 years of history to prove that. I mean, whether it's a worldwide dictator or whether it's the guy that mugs you in downtown Bigville somewhere, people, it's not that they don't know, it's they choose to ignore it or they don't care. And those people are just bad people. And we have to protect ourselves from that. And the long-standing history of that is where our judicial system comes from. That's why we have prisons. That's why we have, we don't execute anybody anymore. But we certainly have a punitive judicial system. So if you rob a bank, you're going to have your civil liberties taken away from you, and you're going to get 3 squares and a cot for the next 30 years. I don't know what the penalty is for robbing a bank, but that'll do for now. So you get these people, when you get the people who think like the way you described that, well, his dad was mean to him, or his mother left him when they were a child and he's been struggling. You know what? At some point, you gotta cowboy up. You gotta accept the fact that your life is what it is, and the only person who can change that is you. And sooner or later, there's going to be consequences for what you do in life. And if you're willing to continually make bad choices, don't be surprised if bad things happen. If the left understood that, if these progressives understood that, well, they wouldn't be progressive, or they wouldn't be on the left. But we'd have a much better world, because there's a reason why Plano, Texas is one of the safest places in the world. And that's because everybody carries a gun. And I'm not getting into gun control, but my point is that there are consequences. If you want to commit a crime there, you better be ready to deal with those around you, because they're not going to take it very kindly. So most people, the vast majority of them, behave like normal human beings, because they know there are consequences for their bad decisions, and they don't want to suffer them, because they know that it will be, in some cases, instantaneous. In other cases, it might take a little while to go through the courts.
Well,
man.
Well, what we're coming to the top of the hour here, Nick, so we're going to have to wrap up soon. But just in terms of a final word, I can't emphasize this enough, how important this distinction is between conservatives and progressives, okay, in terms of our appreciation for human nature. Okay, for us as conservatives, we believe in people. And when you believe in people, you have to believe that people are responsible for their actions, that they are independent, autonomous, self-reliant human beings. And they make decisions for better or for worse. And I'll even go so far as to say, I don't necessarily believe that there are good people or bad people. I just think that there are people, and they make good decisions or they make bad decisions. Okay? So I'm even prepared to concede to that point. But the main thing is, we believe in you. We believe in people. Okay? Whereas on the left, the progressives believe that you are nothing more than the product of everything else external to you. Okay? That you don't have control of yourself. Now, maybe I don't have control of the world around me, but I have absolute control of how I'm going to respond to the world around me. And that, I think, is a fundamental difference between progressives, those on the left, and genuine conservatives, okay, we believe in people, not systems, not grand ideas. We believe in people and the ability of people to rise above the circumstances that they may find themselves in, the negative circumstances that they may find themselves in. And with that,
All
Nick,
right.
I'm afraid we're going to have to call it an evening. So,
All right.
yeah, again, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a blast. We're really happy to have you joining us, and wish we could go on for another 2 hours. But unfortunately, we just do this 2-hour show once a week. We split it up into 4 podcasts. So if you're listening to us on the podcast, you can catch us live Wednesday nights from 8 till 10 on ThinkRadio.ca. I guess that's really all I have for now this week, Nick.
All right. With that said, Joseph, I'm going to bid us all good night. Ubi Keditas et amor Dea CBS. Good evening. God bless. Don't let anything disturb your peace. And may you have a fair wind and a following sea.